Okay.
Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jim Stinger. I'm the president of the San Francisco chapter of the Society of West Coast Artists. We are a membership organization, and if any of you out there are not yet members, we would appreciate it if you would go to our website and join our society. And there are many benefits for doing so, and those are listed there as well. Not only do we give demos, but we also have workshops, and you get a discount for the workshops. So, and we also have our own gallery space up in San Bruno. So it's a very nice society to belong to, and we hope that you will join. So another thing I wanted to mention is that, let me see here. No, I forget what it was I wanted to mention. Anyway, so today we are pleased to have Aina Clotas give us a demonstration on drawing a charcoal portrait. So at this point, I think I will turn it over to her and let her introduce herself. So take it away, Aina. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Jim. My name is Aina Clotas, and I am a figurative artist. I paint mostly portraits, although I also paint still lifes, plein air, interiors, a little bit of everything. And I am originally from Spain, and I studied fine arts in Spain, and then I studied also in the Barcelona Academy of Arts, where I learned traditional art, basically figure, light, anatomy, color, etc. And I taught in there for a while, and I moved to the Bay Area a couple of years ago, actually. And I am currently teaching at CSM. I'm teaching oil painting, plein air, a little bit of everything again, plein air, portraiture, still life, and also figure drawing. And today I'm going to show you guys my process of doing a charcoal portrait. And this is something that when I was a student, I actually, in the time that I spent in the Barcelona Academy of Art, that was a training that was 3 years old. And before any student would even grab a brush to start painting, we were really taught the base of drawing, as I was saying before, light, shading, anatomy, rendering, etc. So what I'm going to do today is going to be the same thing that I learned over that 1.5 period of my life when I was a beginner student in the Barcelona Academy of Art, and I'm going to use the same method that I was using in there. Okay, so before I go ahead,
I only see a small little square where all the people are. Where I don't see you on the whole screen. How do I get that?
Who is talking? What's a question?
Sandy. Yeah. How do I get a large screen to see it close?
Is what you're seeing, is it a little mosaic with tiny little faces? You see everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, then that is because you have something activated that's called the gallery view, and you should activate what's called a speaker view. So you see me in the big screen. And I'm not sure in which device you are. If you're in the phone, well, whether you're in the phone or your computer or on a tablet, it should be in some sort of corner. So you should try and look for an option that says gallery view and change it to speaker view. And
this thing it says the shared screen and participation.
The way that I'm recording this anyway, I'm recording myself in big. So if you don't manage on time to find that option, the recording is going to show me in big. So maybe if you miss any kind of, you got it?
Well, wait, I could have had full screen just a minute. Full screen. Oh, there you go. Well, it's bigger.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
When I work with detail, though, I'm going to bring my camera a little bit closer to the paper so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm doing. But when I start, I'm not going to be working with any detail. I want you to see both my reference and my painting at the same time. And when I need to say something, of course, you're going to see my face. Okay, so before I start, I'm going to show the materials that I'm going to be using. And this is mainly charcoal, and I use 4 different kinds of charcoal. The first one that I'm going to be using is this, sorry, the camera's here, is this vine charcoal, a basic one. I don't really have any preference for the brand or for even the size at all. What I like about this one, it's a rather cheap, actually, charcoal. What I like about this one is that it is it's actually really easy to erase. So if I put down a line, I can easily get rid of it. So that's a charcoal that I'm going to use in the very beginning when I'm blocking in the main shape of the face. Then when I'm done with that, I'm going to start using these other charcoals that are considered professional grade charcoals. The name of the brand is Nitram. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They're made in Canada, and they have 3 different kinds. Actually, they have 4, but the ones that I use are 3. One is B, the other one is HB, and the other one is H. So it's kind of like pencils, the same relationship in softness. And I'm going to start with the B. I'm going to then move on to the HB, and then I'm going to use the H for the small details. And before I start, well, of course, also I'm also going to be using an eraser. You're going to see that I do have a Stump here with me, but I'm actually pretty much not going to use it, only for very small details. So a lot of people ask me, do you use Stumps? And the short answer to that would be no. The long answer would be no, but sometimes I do. I barely ever use them, but today you may see me using them just a little bit. Another item that I use is this black mirror. This is basically actually where I bought that, it was in Home Depot. This is a welding lens, but what that helps me is that I'm going to show you my setup so I can see, you guys can see better how I use it. But basically I use it to see my drawing upside down, and that helps me correct. When I get to use it, I'm gonna show you and explain a little bit more how I use it. The last thing that I'm going to say is that all my charcoals are sharpened. The way that they come out of the box when you buy them, those the Nitram charcoal is square like this, as you can see. And when I use them, I use a sanding block that I have right here. This is just a sanding block from a hardware store, and I sharpen them until they have this quite sharp tip. And before I started today, I actually have these many charcoals sharpened. There is 5 Bs, 5 HBs, and 5 Hs. So I'm not going to spend too much time during the presentation sharpening my charcoals. And before I start, I want you guys to see my setup. So I'm going to change to this other camera. And what I do, you're going to see me drawing from here, but what you're not going to be seeing, and I want you guys to be aware that I do that, is that to look both at my reference and my painting, I'm going to step back all the way until here. So I'm almost 5 feet away from my drawing. And that's very important, because if I draw the entire time only at this distance, very close to my painting, all the time just looking at something and then transferring to my paper and then look again without stepping back, I do not have a chance to see my drawing as a whole. When I look at my drawing or my painting or whatever it is that I'm doing from very up close, I can only compare details. And most of the times when we do that too much, then is when big structural problems happen. Like, for example, my head is too long, my nose is too low, etc. Okay, so I'm going to change back to the other camera. And I'm going to go ahead and start. As you can see, I also have a brush here. Basically, the main reason that I use this brush is to get rid of some excess dusts you're going to see me doing. And also I use it to measure diagonals. So first thing that I want to do to start with is get the blocking of the entire face and head. You're going to see that I'm not going to be looking too much at small detail pretty much at any point of the drawing process. I'm always going to be looking at first bigger shapes and then moving on to smaller shapes. All right, so now I'm stepping back. That's why you don't see me in the camera. And I'm just trying to see. So basically, I'm just using the brush like this to measure the width of the entire head. So from the hair here to the hair here, the whole thing. And I'm trying to see what is the relationship in terms of height. So between here and here. What I like about this kind of hair is that it's really forgiving. If I make it a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, pretty much no one's going to notice. But to start with, it's going to help me to figure out the size of my head. All right, so it's pretty much the same height from here to here and to here to here. He's a little bit taller than White. So I'm just going to translate those measurements in my paper. And at this point of the drawing, you're going to see that the lines I use are not very thin. They're not very precise. If I bring my camera a little bit closer, I can show you the kind of line that I'm using. See that it is a very spongy and soft line. It is not a line that it's very specific like this. And so the reason for that is, since I am still getting started, there is still a lot of room for mistakes that I'm going to be correcting. And if my lines are very soft, it's going to be way easier for me to correct this line. And the more information that I have to block in the entire face, the more precise my measurements are going to be. So instead of saying somewhere between here and here is going to be where my hair ends, I'm just going to erase that a little bit and I'll say, okay, this is exactly where my hair ends. But for now, I'm just going to keep working with really spongy, soft lines. All right. And I'm just going to place him whatever I want in the paper, as long as my proportions are right. So you're going to see me measuring very often. Okay, so that would be hair and chin. And now I need to look for that line to separate the entire face from the hair and that other line. And here it is quite hard for me to see exactly with all that information on the cast shadow of the hair on the face, etc. But I'm just going to make it up and I'm going to give him some sort of closure around here. So for me to be able to find those lines, I'm just going to see what is the relationship between this and the rest of the width. So again, you see me measuring, and it is just about a third, maybe a little bit less. So an important thing at this point is that when I'm drawing, I'm not moving my wrist like this, because that would give me curvy lines. I'm also not moving my elbow like this. I'm moving my entire shoulder. So that is going to give me straight lines. All right, checking my inclinations. You're going to see me putting down a line and then checking it 1,000 times. Okay, I need everybody.
Aina, are you muted as well?
I think I was, sorry, I muted everybody, including me, apparently. So what I was saying is that during this process, you're going to see me measuring and correcting and measuring and correcting over and over again. Now, I'm going to go back to this other screen and I'm going to show the image very quickly so you guys see it with a little bit better quality. This is the image that I have printed on the paper right next to my drawing. And now I'm basically looking for very simplified and very big measurements, very big inclinations. Like for example, this one here, etc. And now, for example, when I want to look for all the side of his face, I know that there is a lot of different inclinations, like this one that goes out, this one that goes up, this one that goes in, out again, in again. So instead of looking for all those little angles and all those little inclinations, to not get lost in detail too much, I'm going to first establish what is the relationship between this point and that point, just for me to get the main inclination. And then once I understand that, it's going to be way easier to construct the rest of lines in between. So you're going to see me simplifying tremendously at this point. Okay, I'm going to go back to the other screen. So as I was saying, I know that when I look at him, he has an angle like this. It goes up, it goes in, it goes out, up again. But I'm just looking for this point with this point to get that main inclination. And if I get that right, then everything else is going to be way easier to find. I need to bring it a little bit more in. A couple of years ago, I went to a workshop with an artist that I admire a lot, whose name is Glenn Vilpo. He's actually around 80 years old right now, and he's been an anatomy professor for over 50 or 60 years. I don't know, he's really experienced. And well, he knows the human body by heart. He doesn't need to have a model in front of him to construct a believable figure. And well, the workshop was in portraiture and how to construct the face, etc. And he did say one thing that really stuck with me, that is, most of the mistakes you're going to do are going to happen in the very first minute. So make sure that that minute takes a half an hour. So you have a chance to revise everything, you have to have a chance to double check, etc. Because there is nothing worse than spending 3 hours on a drawing, and then when you're done, you just think, okay, I wish I would have seen that big mistake before and not now, that I'll have to change a ton of things. So that's why at this stage of the drawing, you're going to see me working quite slow. And it is probably, I wouldn't say boring, but it's probably the most tedious part of the drawing, just to look for those main shapes. But if you do it correctly, then whatever you put on top of your drawing is going to be sitting in the proper location. So it is definitely worth to work very slowly and double check every single measurement. So now, as you can see, I'm constructing a little bit other main inclinations. I imagine that you guys don't see too well the contour up here on the face, but I'm just suggesting it to give him a little bit of a closer. Otherwise, just looks like his hair is huge. Right. Checking again these main inclinations. Again, drawing from my shoulder, not drawing from my wrist, so I can get straight lines. Main thing about straight lines is that I only have to think about two things: how inclined it is and how long it is. I don't have to think about how it curves. Is it steady? Is it closed? Is it open? Just have to think about direction and length. So that's why it is a very solid way to construct the portrait. All right. Comparing. Again, I have the sensation that his face may be a little bit too wide for the hair. So I'm just going to bring those lines in. A little bit, and this line out. And at this point, when I start having some information about the entire subject, I don't have only the eyes or only the ear, I have a little bit, pretty much everything blocked in. What I want to do is I want to step back. So that's where I'm going to show you how I use my mirror. I have this mirror, and I'm going to step back as I was saying, at least 5 feet away from my drawing. So I want to be seeing frontally both my drawing and my subject. And I'm going to take my mirror and put it up here in my eyebrows so I can see my subject reflected upside down. And what that does for me is that it gives me a fresh look so I can see all my mistakes, which unfortunately is something that I cannot really show on the camera. But I'm basically just seeing my drawing mirrored, and I can take a few conclusions. For example, this line is a little bit too high. Before I was not aware. Pretty much everything else looks good for now. But using the mirror, as I was saying, it's great because it gives me a fresh look to my drawing, and it makes me aware of mistakes that I may have missed. Okay. At this stage, the more information I add, the more I can see if everything is working well together. So when I start, sometimes when I have only 2 lines, I don't really know if they're correctly placed or not. But when I have 12 lines, like I have right now, I already have a sense in terms of, is he too wide? Is he too tall? Is head too big, hair too small, etc. So now that I have all that big inclination, I can start sculpting all these lines that are going to be sitting on top of this axis. I'm going to also position the line of the eyes so I can see where the cheekbones are. At this point, actually, I'm not thinking too much in terms of anatomy or features. So I'm not thinking in terms of bones or even eyes or nose. I'm just trying to mute that part of my brain and try to think more and how do I see what's in front of me, and not so much of what do I know about it. There is always that discussion in art of, should we paint what we see or should we paint what we know? Well, definitely at this stage, I'm painting what I see, not painting what I know. I know that his nose is going to be somewhere around here, and I know that the shape is what it is. Actually, I haven't introduced him, but this is Joe Altwer. He's my husband, and he is also a painter and artist, and he did a demo, the last demo last month of Still Life. That was him. So of course I'm seeing his face a lot, and it's very easy for me to already know how he looks like. But I don't want to think too much of what I know about him. I want to think of how do I see it. So I'm just looking for abstract shapes. I'm not thinking, oh, I know how he looks, I'm just going to draw that. No, I have to just look and compare spaces. So now I already have the whole size of his face, and it still feels a little bit too white to me. I may bring that in just a touch. But his entire abstract shape is starting to happen. See, that's a nice thing about having very soft lines. Now, if I want to make his face a little bit narrower, I can just erase that line a little bit, crop it, so it looks like it's a little bit farther to the left, and crop that line so it looks like it's a little bit farther to the right. And now he has already shrinked a little bit. Right. His ear is going to be somewhere around here. This needs to be a little bit more inclined. As I've been seeing in this stage of the drawing, you're going to see me making constant corrections to this very abstract shape. But if I get it right, then when I put the nose and the eyes and the mouth and everything, it's going to be sitting properly where it needs to sit. A very common mistake that happens to me sometimes too, if I'm not paying attention. But a very common mistake that happens to beginners is that they draw the features of the face perfectly, but they are not sitting in the proper space in the head. They're not correctly connected to the general shape. So now I'm making sure that I have the perfect ground so that problem doesn't happen to me, which it is tremendously common, as I was saying. So little by little, as you notice, I started with the bigger lines, and now I'm slowly moving on to smaller lines. This line up here, I corrected it a couple of times, but I'm not 100% sure with it. I think it needs to be a little bit more vertical. And also another interesting thing, I'm not working too much in only one area of the face for too long. I like jumping from one place to another just to understand the whole drawing as a unit. I'm not just drawing one eye next to another eye, drawing a head with features, with structure, etc. All right. I'm pretty happy. I'm sure that I'll have to change a few things as soon as I start blocking in my shapes, my features inside of the face shape. But for now, I'm pretty happy with the structure I have. So I'm going to start placing in some of the features. And to place the features, again, I'm not going to think that's an eye, that's a nose. I'm going to look for abstract shapes. And when I'm looking for abstract shapes, at this stage, I want to look for light and shadow. I'm going to go back to my other camera, and I'm going to share my screen again. So what I want to do is analyze where the light is coming from and see the shapes of the shadow. So for example, I know that the shape of the nose is like this. You have one nostril here, the other nostril, the allas of the nose, etc. But instead of looking for contours, instead of looking for that, what I'm going to be looking for is that shape of shadow that is under his nose, that it has, as you can see, a quite abstract shape. If I isolate this shape, nobody's going to look at this and say, oh, it's a nose. But this is the shape that I see when I look at him. So that is the shape that I'm looking for. Same thing is going to happen with the eye, same thing is going to happen with the mouth, the neck, absolutely everything. And for me to locate the right place for all of those features, again, I'm going to look for big relationships. So instead of starting to draw an eye next to another eye, what I'm going to be doing is, for example, see what's the main inclination between the ends, the corner of the eye and the corner of the mouth, the nose, sorry, or then what's the main inclination between the nose and the mouth, etc. So that's what you're going to see me doing now when I go back to my drawing. Okay. So I have the inclination for the eyes that is just a little bit inclined. I have it maybe a tiny bit too inclined. Okay. It is not horizontal, just a little bit inclined. So something like this. And then I want to see how far away that is from the contour of the face. Something like this, I think, would work well. And then from this point here, as I was mentioning, I'm going to look for that inclination to try and locate the nose. So again, I'm using my brush, checking that inclination. Okay. So that's going to be my eye somewhere, and my nose is going to be somewhere around here. Then another thing that I know from faces is that everybody's a little bit asymmetrical, but I know that there is certain perspective that is going to be followed by all the same features. So if the line of my eyes is like this, the eyebrow should be the same, the nose should be the same, and the mouth should be the same. Everybody's a tiny bit asymmetrical. Some people is more, some people is less. But the skull, it is the skull underneath what we see, it is not asymmetrical. So that is what I have to think about when I try and look for those relationships. All right, now try to see that inclination on the nose and see what's the relationship between that inclination of the nose and the contour of the face. And I can see that it is just a little bit below the zygomatic bone or the cheekbone. So I think my nose is going to be somewhere around here. Again, I'm still using very soft lines because I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be that high, that low. It's going to be somewhere in between there. And then from my nose, I can try and locate my mouth. It's going to be somewhere around here. I'm again checking for that inclination between nose and mouth. Double checking. And I can try and find that opening, that piece. It's called the glabella, that little space between the two eyebrows. And I can try and see what's the relationship between this corner of the nose, the wing of the nose, with the eyebrows, both of them. So again, can try and look for inclinations. There's going to be a point soon that my drawing is going to start being rich enough in structure and detail that I don't need to measure. I can just eyeball it, and I just can translate very easily what I see to what I already have here. Notice that he's already starting to look like a face, starting to look like a human, hopefully. So I can easily start feeling the relationships, the spaces, etc. That needs to come in just a little bit more. Right. Eyebrows. Going to be somewhere in here. Okay, I'm going to use the mirror one more time now that I have enough information to compare these and that, just to again check for mistakes. And if I am happy with what I see, I don't see any big correction to be done, then I'm going to start using some of those charcoals. I'm going to start leaving that one aside because I have already my structure, and I can start looking for more precise detail. Okay, I think he's still a little bit too white, so I'm going to move both these lines, this one and that one, a little bit more in. But after I've done that, then I'm happy. I'm ready to start rendering and looking for more detailed explanation.
I know we're getting some background noise. I don't know if that's coming from you or someone else.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know.
Sure.
Okay, now this charcoal, I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm just going to put it aside, and I'm going to start using this one. And as I was saying, for those people who missed the presentation, this is a charcoal that I have, let me see if I can show it. I have sharpened a little bit. So it is going to be very precise, and it's going to give me a very clean mark. So with that one, now that I have my blocking, my base structure, I can start looking for those specific shapes of shadow, both my eyes, my nose, everything. And this is where this very rough structure is going to start looking like him. So actually for that, I'm going to bring my camera a little bit closer so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm doing in terms of detail, etc. And then I'm going to put it back so you see my model again. Okay. So looking for the eye. I'm going to start looking for the abstract shape of the shadow, both of the shadow under the eyebrow and the shadow of the eye itself. The light for this portrait is coming from up above like this, so the shadows are going to be on the underplanes, under the nose, under the chin, on the upper lip, etc. So as I was saying, now that I'm drawing the features, I'm not necessarily just thinking I'm drawing an eye, so it has to look like an eye. I'm looking at my model and just looking at those abstract shapes of shadow. And you're going to see that if I do a good job, hopefully, it's going to start looking like him. Sorry, I forgot to mention the charcoal that I'm using at this stage is the B1, so it's the softer one. The reason for that is that it's still quite easy to erase. It is quite dark, so I can see it better. The lines that I had before were a little bit faint, so now I'm starting to be a little bit more precise, and this charcoal allows me for that. Right. So that, as I was saying before, nobody really would look at this shape isolated and think, oh, that's an eye. But in the right placement, in the right distance and the right design, you're going to see how a face starts to emerge. Okay. I'm going to construct the shape of the nose. Again, thinking in terms of light and shadow. I am not even thinking that that is a nose. But if I construct that abstract shape of the nose correctly, then it is going to look like a nose. Even if it's not nose shaped, it doesn't look like a nose out of a catalog. Right, now I'm going to draw the other eye. Shape is like this. That's the shape of the shadow under the eyelid. Sorry, the eyelid, the eyebrow. The other eye, like this. And then there is a shadow. And like that. All right, then the mouse. Going to be getting rid of some of the older lines if I don't need them anymore. Has quite thick lips. That is the shape of the shadow of the top lip. That is the shadow. So the light is kind of coming from this side. So all this side of the face is going to be more shaded. So that's why this eye has a shadow here. There is a big shadow here that I'm going to work on next. That is the shadow under the bottom lip. That is the shadow under the neck, that it's actually has this shape and then goes down like this and like that. Let me give him a neck too, shoulders, otherwise it feels like it's just floating. Okay. I'm going to place my camera back to where it was so you can compare what you see here with the reference. And you can see that even if any of those shapes, it is looking like an eye or a nose or a mouth, it's actually starting to look like him. Whoops, sorry, there we go. And that is just me thinking in terms of light and shadow. So now again, I have, what I've done is I have established my structure. Now I'm just looking for those shapes of light and shadow. And again, I'm going to use, step back and use the mirror one more time just to check my drawing. And this is something that I actually kept, when I was a teacher in Barcelona, I kept telling my students, if you would use the mirror way more often, you wouldn't even need me to tell me what's right or wrong because you would be able to see it yourself. All right, so now I'm checking my drawing upside down in my mirror. And I actually think that both my nose and my mouth are just a touch too low. So before I get too much into detail and then I regret it, I'm going to take a minute to push them up just a little bit, which should be fairly easy because now my shapes are quite abstract. So it's not like I'm losing a lot of detail or anything. So I'm just bringing my shapes up, sculpting them. If somebody has any doubt, please don't be shy. Just go ahead and meet yourselves. I always encourage my students to do so. You don't want to keep an answer. If you're trying to be over respectful and you don't want to interrupt, just saying, I really don't mind at all when people interrupt me when I'm drawing. I actually like it. Okay, so I push my nose up. I'm also trying to see what's the alignment, and I think that my nose needs to be pushed just a tiny bit to the left too. So again, I want to make sure that I do all of those corrections now and not too late. My eyes are a little bit too close together. All right, and my nose tiny bit too long. Okay, that's better. And now my nose, my mouth. As you notice, I'm only drawing top lip. I'm not drawing the mustache or I'm not drawing the beard. And the main reason for that is because I am looking for light and shadow. I am not looking for dark or light objects. Notice that even if the mustache is a dark object itself, since the light is coming from here, actually the mustache gets light. If I were to paint the mustache as a shadow, it would feel like there is a hole in there. It feel like the volume is distorted. So for now, I'm just thinking in terms of light and shadow. Okay. A little bit higher up, and then the bottom lip as well. Just a tiny millimeter. Okay, then I need to give him that shadow on the side of his face. Just to feel that entire volume. And at the same time, now that I have all my shapes as I was doing before, I was checking the relationship in terms of placement and size and distances between each one of my abstract shapes. I can also see how far away the nose is from the side of the face. I still think my nose should be pushed a tiny bit. As I was saying in the beginning, you're going to see me advancing, stopping, correcting, advancing, checking, correcting. So it doesn't really go in a very linear way for me. One thing that I've noticed is the more I draw, it's not like I do less mistakes. The main change that I've done, the more I draw, the thing that I've gained from practice is that I see those mistakes faster and I know how to fix them, but I still do them. Less and less with time, but having more experience, it allows me to kind of foresee those mistakes and to fix them before they become a problem. All right. Now let's give him a shape, a shadow, sorry, under the neck. If my charcoal loses its tip, ideally what I would do would be just taking my sanding block that I have right here and I would be just sharpening it again. But since I don't want to take too much time from the demo, I'm just going to take another one. Otherwise, the ones that I already sharpened yesterday. But now I'm starting to feel that this one that I have starting to become a little bit dull. Doesn't give me those super fine lines. So I may change it soon. Before I do that, though, I'm going to cover the entire area of the hair. And also the ear, because the ear is in shadow. You can see here's the even if the ear is a little bit lighter than all the hair around it, it is still in shadow. So at this stage, I need to consider it a shadow and period. Then when the moment comes, I'm going to start distinguishing it from the hair, etc. But notice that even if I don't have a ton of detail, it already starts having certain volume. And the way that I like filling in large areas of volume like this is I will go once like this, and then I would go again in another direction. Notice that I'm not pressing a lot with my charcoal. I'm just almost touching my paper. I like call it like almost like a record player, just a little bit, just the right amount of pressure. And then I'm starting to be a little bit in the middle. I'm going to go in this direction too. All right. I don't want to take too much time on the demo with this part. I have to say that the drawings that my charcoal drawings, none of them are done with 2 hours. I normally take 6 hours or 7 hours. So today I'm kind of rushing everything. If I had the time, I would spend even more time in the blocking stage, just making sure that everything is well found, etc. But since I have a limited amount of time, I'm going to rush it a little bit just so I can get to all the stages. Okay, so you can see this charcoal is a little bit dull right now. I'm not going to use it anymore. And I'm going to change to the next one. Now, next thing that I want to do is be a little bit more precise about edges. What I mean about edges is all these contours between shadow and light. And for that, I want to look at my reference again and pay attention to what kind of shadow do I have. And for that, I'm actually going to, you guys have seen that image of the shading ball probably a lot of times. I'm going to bring my camera a little bit closer, where we have light that's illuminating it from this end, and then there is a shadow, and then there is the cast shadow. So there is two main different kinds of shadow or shadow edge. This one right here, that it's called a form shadow. That's the shadow that exists because the surface of the object itself slowly turns away from the light until it doesn't receive any light at all. And then there is this other kind of shadow that's called a cast shadow. That is basically, it exists just because there is a certain object that's blocking the light to another object, in this case, the table, the surface. For every form shadow, there is always a cast shadow. And for every cast shadow, there is a form shadow. So I have to go back to my subject and analyze each one of those edges to see if it's a form shadow or if it's a cast shadow. The way to differentiate them is that all the form shadows are going to be softer, they're going to be more gentle, the transition is going to be more gradual, and the cast shadows are going to be sharper, they're going to be more abrupt. And for that, I'm going to go back to my other camera. Okay, Vicky, I'm just seeing your questions now on the chat, and the mirror that I have, this is a welding lens. Actually, it's not sold as a mirror, and you can find it on Home Depot. This is an object that it cost me, I think, $2.50. It is really inexpensive, and it's very, very helpful for checking your own mistakes. Okay, so now going back to the quality of the edges, for example, I'm going to talk about the nose. I did already analyze the shape of the shadow of the nose. That's like this. That's the shape that I have already designed in my drawing. And if we think about all of the edges in the nose, we can see that this edge up here is going to be a form shadow just because it's the shape of the nose itself. that it turns away from the light until it becomes a shadow. And then all this part of the shadow is going to be a cast shadow because it's the nose itself casting a shadow onto the upper lip. So when I start thinking about that, I'm going to go back to the other camera. And for that, I'm actually going to start coming a little bit closer because that's a little bit more detailed. So I want you guys to be able to see it. When I start thinking and analyzing in terms of form shadow or cast shadow, I want to revise every single edge that I have, absolutely everywhere, and give it the right softness. So I'm going to start with the nose, since this is what I talked about now in the short demonstration. And okay, so we have determined that this shadow up here is going to be a form shadow. So I'm going to take my eraser. I like to give it a very fine tip, and I'm going to soften a little bit this transition. And with a very sharp charcoal, I'm still using a B, that's the green one. I'm going to give it a very soft transition. So as you can see, this edge right here, now it's soft. And then that part that it's going to be a cast shadow, I'm going to give it a sharp edge. And at the same time, I'm also taking advantage of that to improve my shapes. Like I think that this one could be a tiny bit more inclined. And I'm using both my charcoal and my eraser to lock in and to design those shapes. All right, so as you can see, there is already some sort of difference in terms of how those edges in the bottom read, and this one here, that one is way softer, so it feels like the form is sharp, is round and soft, and these ones are sharper, so it feels like there is a cast shadow from the nose. And now again, I'm going to revise the entire picture, looking for softer and sharp edges. So the edge here and the lips is going to be really, really sharp. The division between the upper lip and the bottom lip, it does have a shape a little bit like this. In the corner of the lip, a little bit more to the right. And then the upper part's going to be a little bit softer. I'm going to add the mustache soon. So it's going to be, I'm going to get the lightness right there. But for now, I'm just going to check for all the edges of all the shapes that I have. And not only think about how sharp or how soft they are, but also I'm going to take the time to improve their shape, the size, the proportion. If there's something that I don't think it works, I'm going to look for a better design, etc. So right now, I've moved that one a little bit lower. That one is a cast shadow, so it's going to be quite sharp. This one is a form shadow. This one is a soft form shadow as well. And then one of the softer shadows in the face is going to be the jaw. So that one is going to be really soft.
I know, this is Jim. Could you also use the paper stump to soften edges?
That's a very good question. I could, but what I like about using the charcoal is that it gives me more control. The stump, sometimes I feel like it gets a little bit messy. Sometimes it loads a little bit too much charcoal, and then it pushes it in areas where I don't want it. But if I use this, I can decide how much to go. When I'm blending things, I do not only decide how to blend, but also in what shape to blend. Like if I want to blend it in this direction, for example, or in this other direction. So I know that a lot of people use thumbs, and as I was saying before, I use them too sometimes. But for this fine detail and for blending, I actually like to use charcoal. And you're going to see by the end of the demonstration how soft my painting is going to, my drawing is going to look, and I don't really have to use stumps pretty much at all if you're fine, if you're delicate with your hand. just giving him again the angle of the mandible here. Also, you're going to notice that right now I'm still using the charcoal B. As soon as I change to HB and then H, you're going to see that the surfaces are going to start being way more smooth, and I'm still going to have that big amount of control on my shapes and my designs. So that's something that I like of softening with charcoal as opposed to softening with the Stump. All right, let me see. I'm going to finish the eyes, and then I think it would be a good moment for everybody to take a short break. It's been already an hour, and I think that probably everybody needs to take a few minutes to stretch the legs, to get a little bit more coffee. But before I do that, I want to finish that stage of the drawing. So I'm looking for, okay, that's a sharp edge here. There is a small soft edge in the corner of the eye. That is going to be another sharp edge that has a precise shape, a little bit more like this. Then actually there is a very small shadow in here that I forgot before. That edge in here is going to be very sharp. And that edge in the upper part of the eyebrow is going to be very soft. And this one, let me correct the inclination. It's going to be very soft up here. Very sharp down here. Actually, this is a better shape for it. A little bit more horizontal too. This is going to be a really sharp edge. That's the end of that shadow, and it's really abrupt because that's already the nose. And then this is going to be a slightly sharp edge, soft, sorry, but not too much. And then here, another sharp edge. And then of course, I also have to start analyzing all the shapes on the contour of the face. Okay. My neck, oops, I've lost my ear. Let me go back and place it down, covered by hair, just so I don't lose it too much. Okay, so how about we take a little break now? I need to move my camera just a little bit. We can take a break now, and how about we take 5 minutes off so everybody can go to the bathroom, get a little bit more coffee. And in the meantime, I'm not going to touch the drawing at all, so you guys are not going to miss anything. And we all gather back in, let's say now it's 2:07, I'm going to be back here and I'm going to continue. If anybody has any question, feel free to do that. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to sharpen my charcoals and get ready for the second half. So if somebody has any question or any mention or any kind of story, you feel free to share it now in the break. And then in just 5 minutes, we're going to be back. I'm going to continue working. And I'm also not sure if you guys are seeing this mirrored. I am, is he looking towards the left or the right in your screen? Is it
To the left.
to the left? Oh, okay, so he is in the right orientation.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so now I'm going to continue, and during the break, I didn't touch anything. Everything is still the way I left it, but I have given it a fresh look, and there's a few things still from the basic structure that I just keep going back and rechecking and insisting the entire time that I see. For example, he doesn't have enough head in the back of his head, and the hair here is a little bit too thick. As I was saying, for this kind of hair, it is tremendously forgiving. I can do pretty much whatever I want, and it's still going to look good. But at least I need some more space down here. Otherwise, it feels like he doesn't have enough room for his skull. And I need to bring this line a little bit farther down. And now that I'm going to go back into more detail, I'm going to also start looking for all these shadows, etc. So what I've done up until now is setting up my structure. I place my light and shadow division, and then on top of those edges between light and shadow, I have established which ones are soft and which ones are sharp. Sorry, I think it's a little bit too long. So now the next thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start adding midtones, and I'm going to start adding the beard, the mustache, etc. So I'm not thinking in terms of light and shadow only. Now I'm starting to get to the same values that I see here. And for that, I'm going to stop using the green charcoal, and I'm going to start using the orange one, that it's an HB. The main difference is that this one, it is not as dark. Even if I was not pressing a lot with the green, it is the darkest one. It is the one that leaves more charcoal behind. So, and also at the same time, is the one that gets duller the faster. So with this, I have a little bit more working time before I lose the tip. And also I can be a little bit more precise and delicate with my values. So I'm going to start looking for big midtones. Same idea as I always say, I'm going to start with the big midtones and then start with the small ones. Meaning I'm not going to start looking, I'm going to go back to this art image because right now I'm going to start talking about detail, but I'm not going to be looking for small detail like this or small detail like that, but I'm going to start looking for big relationships. For example, what I'm going to be doing, which you guys cannot see, is I'm going to be squinting a lot with my eyes. So I see him a little bit blurry and I don't see too much detail, which is something that I always like doing with my students, just by blurring the image a little bit. So if I squint my eyes, that's what I'm going to be seeing. And if I see that, I see less detail, but I see big shapes of shadow of midtone. Like this is a big shape, that is going to be another big shape. This here is going to be another shape. So instead of looking for tiny detail, I'm looking for more bigger relationships. I can see that the lighter areas are going to be pretty much this. So this is what I'm going to try and look for. Okay, change the camera again. All right, so I was saying big relationships. I'm going to start thinking on the side of his face that's turning away from the light a little bit. So it's going to start getting a little bit darker. I gotta be careful not to go too dark. If my midtones look as dark as my shadows, then I'm just going to lose my structure. So at the same time that I'm adding midtones, you're going to see me also darkening some of my shadows just to still keep them separated. Now I'm going to add the mustache and the beard. So for example, here in the chin is a little bit darker on the left, a tiny bit darker, lighter on the right. And I'm going to, instead of just thinking on small relationships, I'm going to be analyzing big relationships, like these, not only these and that, but how dark or light this is in comparison with all of that. So as I was saying, just big relationships. I don't want to press too much. I'm just going to be building the tone little by little. All this side of the face is going to be darker than this side of the face. So I'm just going to darken it as a whole. And also the nose. The nose has some highlights that I'm going to look for a little bit later. I'm just going to take them with the eraser. Actually, I have to say that I should be wearing glasses in order to see detail. Actually, at this point, when I'm looking at this image myself, I see it a little bit blurry, but I like that because it keeps me focused on what's important for now. When I need to see detail, you're going to see me putting my glasses on. But for now, I actually kind of enjoy the poor vision because it allows me to focus on what's important and not get distracted. And that is something, again, I barely ever do a portrait in 2 hours. Most of the times I take way longer. So I'm already darkening faster than I normally would. I like to darken very, very softly, very gently. So I have cleaner lines. Because right now it does look a little bit messy, but I'm going to be fixing it a little bit towards the end of the demo. Right, there goes the mustache. I like how every time that I add the mustache, the likeness just happens magically. Right, again, I want to make sure that my midtones are not as dark as my shadows, so I'm still darkening all my shadows. So my upper lip has to be dark. All the side of the face needs to be quite dark as well. And even if the mustache is actually a darker value than the average skin, when the skin is in shadow, it's going to be darker than the mustache that's in light. So that's why I need my midtones and my shadows well separated. Otherwise, all the volume that my picture has just gets lost. The bottom lip is going to be a little bit dark. There is a little bit of a midtone that I'm going to get to later. That's just going to be a little bit of the eraser. All right, still think my nose is a little bit too long. Make it a tiny bit shorter. Keep darkening my shadows. Again, so they don't look too much like my midtones. not going to spend too much time on the neck or the t-shirt, but if that was a longer project, I would definitely make sure that all the values in the neck are also coherent with the values on the face. My neck's a little bit too wide. Let's be a tiny bit shorter. Okay. Then just same that I've been doing on the face, I'm going to do on the hair very quickly. I did a first pass with my B charcoal, and now I'm going to make another pass with my HB. And as you're going to see, as I move onto my HB and then eventually my my H, all of the lines, all of these cross hatching is going to slowly get unified. It's going to slowly disappear. So it is going to be almost as using a stump in terms of the visual appearance. And this is also, again, another thing that if I had more time to draw this, I would do that slow. So I don't like too much these harsh lines, but for today, we'll have to embrace them a little bit. You can see little by little, he's starting to feel more volumetric. And even if I am towards the finishing stages, not quite, but I'm still going to do another pass, another revision to everything. But I am still checking for mistakes in terms of drawing. I'm still trying to see if there's something that I'm not happy with. Because as I was saying in the beginning, the more information I have, the more capacity I have also to see if things are working or not. Right, let me change my charcoal again. It's getting a little bit low. And now all of those sharp edges and soft edges that I found before, I'm just refining them. So some of those soft edges here, I'm making them softer. I'm also making them a little bit more specific in terms of, I'm not only thinking it's soft, it's sharp, I'm also thinking, okay, how soft it is in comparison with another thing. In which direction is the transition happening? That is something I'm going to change the image again so I can show it here. Like I can see if I zoom in the glabella, that part in between the eyebrows, that the transition, the softness of this shadow kind of points towards up. So notice that it is not only that this edge is sharp, it's soft, sorry, it has a direction, and that is the form of well, the bone and just the form of the eyebrow. Okay. I'm going to bring the image a little bit closer so you can see a little bit better the kind of lines that I have. And now see that my charcoal is still fairly sharp. And what I'm working, I was saying, I'm not only thinking about how soft it is or how sharp it is, I'm also trying to soften it in the direction that the forms are flowing. And of course, I also have to keep sharp, darkening some of my shadows, improving the shapes. Now my eyebrow was a little bit too thick, so I made it a little bit shorter. I'm losing a little bit my eyeball here, so I'm just restating it. The nice thing about this charcoal is that since it's not as dark as the B, it allows me to be a little bit more precise. All right. Try to render that soft shape of the nose. Being careful, I don't want to lose the shape of the shadow. Kind of explain the shape of the nose, the midtones on one side and the other. And I can just bring back that highlight on the bridge of the nose just with the eraser. And then right here, there's also a little bit of highlight. At this stage of the drawing, there is something that I like doing when pretty much all my paper is covered with charcoal. One thing that I tend to do that I shouldn't do is I tend to lean a lot on my drawing. Is basically more practical for me. So one thing that I like doing, especially in this stage, is I take a little bit of tape and I just actually tape my knuckle on the pinky. So then I don't smudge. So I'm gonna be wearing that from now on. Yeah, the slightly sharper nose. This is a process that it is slow, but if the structure that I worked on before is correct, I should not be worrying too much about placement or structure at this point because I have it pretty much already established. I should be concerning myself more with transitions and smaller details, etc. So this is something, as I was saying before, and it was asked, I don't really use a stump, but I do use this fan brush. As you can see, I don't use it for paint. It's already dirty with charcoal. And I use that to soften some lines. If I did have a lot of time, I would not be using any of that. Instead, I would just be really patient and filling up all these little gaps in between my lines with the H charcoal that I'm going to be showing later. But since this is a shorter demo, I'm going to use that, and it basically gets rid of all the excess charcoal that I don't need anymore, or if I've not been careful enough and some of my transitions are a little bit messy or something with that, I can clean them a little bit. All right, you guys are very quiet. Nobody has a question. Am I being so clear?
I know this is Jim. I've noticed you hold the charcoal way at the end. Is there a reason for that?
I'm sorry, can you, with this? I'm not sure I
No,
understood.
no, with the charcoal
Mhm.
stick, you
Yes.
hold it near the end.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, I mean, I think when I hold it like this, all the vibration, I don't have a tremendously steady hand, so all the vibration and the movements from the hand tends to translate a little bit more. And if I take it from the end, it is a little bit more stabilized. It is a little bit harder to control, but once you do, it feels actually easier to make cleaner marks.
Uh-huh.
So that is the main reason. And I actually do the same as well with my brushes. I like to hold them from as far away as I can handle.
Right.
Right, bringing some highlights with the eraser. I draw as much with my charcoal than with my eraser. Actually, it's a tremendous tool. And sometimes I even use it. That's a trick that I experimented with and I really like it. If I have, this is the sanding block that I use to sand my charcoal. And sometimes what I do, if I want to unify a little bit my marks, if they're a little bit too messy, is I'm going to make a dip with my eraser like this, and then I'm going to saturate it with some of the dust that I have here on the sanding block. So now my tip has already some charcoal in it, and then I shake off the excess or just blow it. And that is a really good tool to unify. So it doesn't erase too much because it's already saturated. It just blends things. It makes things a little bit lighter, but also at the same time, it unifies. So it is a very good trick that not a lot of people know. And I use that especially when I'm already in the final stages. If I only want to erase something a little bit. All right, I'm gonna take a few steps back just to take in the entire, okay, I think I still need to go a little bit darker here on the side of the face. So I'm constantly tracking and keeping track of my relationships. I want to make sure that I don't focus too much in only one area, and also I don't want to be working super close from my painting all the time. I have to remember to step back, which is something that right now I was already forgetting. I was getting caught too much in detail, and that I step back, I noticed that this is still way too light. So I'm going to start darkening it, and also all this side here. Clean a little bit some of those messy passages. All right. And now that I have established most of my midtones, I'm going to go and change to the last charcoal. That's going to be the H, the blue one. And with that, I'm going to be able to unify, I'm going to be able to look for detail, etc. And another thing that I like doing with this one is giving the hair a little bit more structure. Right now, the hair just looks like a blob, doesn't really have too much texture in it. And what I like doing with this charcoal is I use it to soften a little bit the edges. As you can see, the kind of line that I get out of this charcoal is quite faint, as opposed to the kind of line that I was getting with my HB, and of course even more from my B that is way darker. So with this last one, it also depends, of course, on how much pressure I put. But with the B, the B, I can get dark pretty fast, and it can get a little bit messy for smaller details. And I like the H because, first of all, it retains the shape, the tip, for much longer. It allows me to work in smaller details and gentle transitions. Like right now, I'm working with the hair, just giving it some sort of softness. And I'm not going to spend too much time on the hair. As I was saying, if I did have more time to work in this, I would probably be a little bit more detail oriented and look for some of the curls, some of the highlights, some of the shadows. But since I don't want to take too much time for the demo doing that, I'm just going to suggest the texture as opposed to explain it. And actually, I think there is something really smart about suggesting textures or details as opposed to over explaining it. I am really not a big fan of hyper realistic drawing or painting. I mean, I can admire their skill. I couldn't do that myself if I wanted to, but I am way more attracted to other kind of results. So with the hair, as I was saying, I'm not going to explain every single curl. I'm just going to, first of all, start with giving the entire hair kind of like a fuzzy edge. So the texture of the softness of the curls is already suggested somehow. And then I'm going to bring in some details here and there. Okay, this slightly darker line here bothers me a little bit, so I'm just going to unify it. And then one thing that I like doing is I take my kneadable eraser and I'm going to give it a flat edge like this, almost like a little razor. And I bring it in like this, like that. And that brings in the texture of the hair already. Oops. If it gets too dirty like this, I just fold it over and continue. So that is pretty much how I suggest the hair as opposed to explaining it a lot. And then of course I can always just bring back. Now I'm going to use the B, so my brush strokes are a little bit more visible. Sorry, my brush strokes, my marks. And I just suggest some of the curls. And that will be it for the hair. That's what I do if I don't have a lot of time. So it already looks like hair, but I'm gonna leave it like that for now. And then moving on to the H, I'm going to go back to the face and little by little revising absolutely everything one more time, being more precise in both values, in edges, in smaller transitions, shapes, etc. So I'm going to bring back my camera so you guys see both the original and the drawing. And with the H, you're going to see that I do not change the value a lot. It is really very mild, as you saw in here, but I can unify things. I can be a little bit more detail oriented. Like for example, I can see here on the chin, that this shape in here is slightly darker than this little shape down here. So that's something that I can easily do with my H, just insisting a little bit more up here. And since it doesn't get dark dramatically, I can control it a little bit better. Let's hide the face. How the eyebrow here is connected with the corner of the eye, which is something that I didn't have before. Now I can look for these kind of more subtle things. The temple, which is covered by hair, but it's going to be a little bit darker. I did say that I would put all those shadows in here and I haven't yet. That's because I have more fun things to do, but I should, otherwise it doesn't really look precise enough, doesn't look specific enough. All right. Bringing in some more specific shapes to the nose. The top part of the wing of the nose is going to be slightly darker, which is something that I really didn't pay attention to before because it was a small detail. Now I can suggest it, how this part is also getting a little bit darker. It gets lighter as it turns around. So now I'm looking for detail. I have kind of been ignoring it up until now, making sure that my base structure was working, making sure that my base values were working. And now it's a moment where I can have fun and add as much detail as I want. As I said, I'm not really a tremendously detailed painter or drawer myself, but I like to explain a few things, of course. so the face fits well. Okay, these lines here are a little bit messy. This whole side of face needs to get quite darker. These also needs to get much darker. Now my shadows don't shine enough. So again, I'm going to one more time bring back, make them a little bit darker. And for me to do that, it's going to be way easier to do it with the V than with the H. It's going to be faster. So I'm going to change my charcoal one more time. Okay, got to bring the highlight in the lips. Okay, I'm going to go back to my B charcoal, and I'm going to use this one that is quite sharp again, and I'm going to re-establish all of my shadows, because with that process of darkening my midtones and some of my transitions and lights, my charcoals, my shadows have lost that power a little bit. Also bring some of that beard here. Be a little bit more specific about some of those shadows. And one thing that I like doing also at this stage is making a few accents just to make some volumes pop. And this is something I'm going to do it, for example, on the nose. And I'm going to, move the camera again so you can see that with a little bit more detail. But I have the nose. All right, that's a little bit better. If I make, I'm going to look back for the shadow of the nose that I've lost a little bit. I'm going to make that dark so it really reads like a shadow and it starts feeling more volumetric. And then if I place a little slightly darker mark right along the shadow edge, it's going to make the nose feel more volumetric. First of all, I have to bring that shadow down a tiny touch. It's a little bit too high. Okay, so now make a little accent right here, making it a little bit darker. The entire nose pops a little bit. Same, if I make slightly darker in here in the eyebrow, this entire volume pops as well. Little shadow right here, the mustache, and then I'm going to bring that little tiny accent up here, the upper part of the lip. I don't want it to contrast it. Right, the division between the mouth and the lip, quite explained. I also like the same thing that I did with the contour of the hair, that I gave it kind of a fuzzy texture. I also like doing here on the beard. So with my eraser like this, with a small tip, I like just creating some sort of busy texture in here, just so it looks like it has the texture of the hair. All right. I'm going to finally get to those hairs. Those individual curls. I don't want to make them too distracting. I don't want that to be the first thing that my viewer notices, but I definitely need a little bit of something here just to make the transition between flesh and hair a little bit easier to read and understand. Okay, I'm going to move back my camera so you guys can see both of them. And pretty much now towards the final stages. So again, I'm going to keep using my mirror to check for main relationships. And okay, main thing that I see is that my nose is way too light. If I compare it there, the relationship in value between the shadow and the light, it almost feels like the white is painted in white. So I want to establish those value relationships. And for that, I'm going to be using one of the HB, because if I use a B, it would probably be too dark. If I use an H, it will probably take me too long. But if I had to summarize the process, what I would say in a few statements or steps, even if you want, I would say I always work from big, general to small to detail. So I first establish big lines and then I go to the detail. Same thing goes with values. I first establish big relationships and then I go to details. Also, another important thing that I always think about is that I never draw features, I draw shapes. I draw abstract images that I see, like the abstract shape of the shadow of the eye. As you can see, it does look more like an eye than any eye that will be drawn like this. That will be a symbol. It is not really how an eye looks. So what I have right here, responding to those abstract shapes of light and shadow, it is much closer to what we actually see than this. This is knowing, drawing too much what I know it's there, what I think it's there, and this is drawing a little bit more in terms of what I actually see. When I was drawing this shape, I was never thinking I'm drawing an eye. I'm just trying to see the actual shape that I was seeing without stressing too much about it looking like an eye. And as I was saying before, if I isolate it, it does not look like an eye, but since it's in the right placement, the right proportion, and the right design, hopefully, I think it has some room for improvement. But since all of that is happening, then it does read like an eye way more than this symbol. So we are actually 10 minutes away from the end. If somebody has any question or if somebody has any doubt, now it's the moment. My final touches to this drawing are going to be just kind of the same, making sure that everything looks okay, making sure that all my big relationships are well established, etc. And I could bring a few slightly darker accents in some places, like here in this eye, for example, just to make it pop a little bit. Also, one thing that you may have noticed, I haven't really drawn the eyeball, but it already looks like he's looking at a certain direction. This is again a product of drawing abstract shapes as opposed to drawing symbols. That if those shapes are correct, then everything is going to read like what it needs to read. Okay. I'm going to do one more pass to the hair, just to have it at the same level in terms of values than the face. And then I'm just going to check for final touches and wrap up for today. If I would have the time, what I would do to the hair to make it feel a little bit more unified would be giving it a last touch with a lot of patience with one of my, hopefully sharp, okay, H charcoal. And with that, I would just be very patiently covering all those little gaps in between. And if I do that, the final result is going to be really, really soft, almost like if I used a stump, but without all that dragging aspect that a stump can have. I like stump, as I was saying before, I like stump just for very small details. Like, for example, if I had, I'm going to move back my camera so you can see it a little bit more in detail. But if I had, for example, in the area of the eye, if I wanted to bring one of the tiny wrinkles in, I could just take the stump, for example, and make some very gentle little mark in here or in there. So for that, I like because it's very precise. But for blending, I actually think that it makes me lose the structure a little bit. I much prefer just being a little bit more patient and, for example, using an H, like in this case, I just work with that one really slow. I can design the shape that I want. I can see in which direction do I want to blend, and I have more control over the final aspect. Bringing back some highlights. So that's something that I may want to correct, for example, with this thumb, that very tiny shape of that highlight. Bring a little bit of detail. That would be the kind of thing that if that, instead of being a 2-hour drawing, it would be a 6-hour drawing. Probably towards the last hour, that's the kind of thing that I would be doing, just having fun with smaller detail. Okay, tear duct here. Actually, that's something that I shouldn't do. I barely ever touch my painting or drawing with my fingers because my fingers have some grace in it and it can ruin it over time. That grease is going to show if I do it too much. I don't like doing it, but sometimes I can't help it. If it's something very small, just go boop, tiny touch. Well, I really don't see the moment to stop. I could just go on forever, but it is already 2:55, and I think that it's time to start wrapping up for the session. And just again, if somebody wants to use those last minutes for questions, please go ahead and unmute yourselves or just type a question in the chat. Now that I don't have to draw, I can pay attention to that. And yeah, well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining me. It's been a great pleasure. I hope that I was clear enough and that it was worth watching. Had a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. This has absolutely been fascinating. Thank you for your patience. You've done a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the kind words.
You're welcome, truly.
I know, this is Jim. I was wondering if you wanted to say anything about the paper you're drawing on?
Oh yeah, that's very cool. That is Canson paper, B-Teens. I have another one here. When I was a student in the Barcelona Academy of Arts, we actually use Arches paper that probably you use for watercolor. And what I like about Arches paper is that it can really retain, even if it's not meant to be for charcoal, it really can achieve really dark tones. And if I did have more time on that one, I would gradually keep darkening it until I could actually get, let me see if I can show that. I could go as dark as this, but I would not really go there from, like really pressing on my drawing. I would gradually get there very, very slowly. That's why the process gets so slow. And the Canson B-Tintes, you can see this kind of paper. It has texture on one side and it's a little bit smoother on the other. And I'm using the smooth side, so it allows me for more control with smaller shapes. It is relatively cheap and it comes in different colors. So I could even choose to paint, to draw on a gray paper and use white charcoal, white chalk for the highlights, etc. So most of the times I'm going to use that one, or as I was mentioning, I can use also Arches paper. I like Arches paper because as an object, the drawing feels a little bit more sturdy. It's nicer to look at. It has very beautiful edges, although it's like maybe 10 times the price, but it's really worth it. That's the paper that I used to use in my drawings when I was a student.
So would you use hot press or cold press Arches?
Cold press. Yeah.
Cold press, okay.
Yeah. I think they have 3 different kinds of grain, right? Big grain, small grain, or fine grain. I use the fine grain, but not the hot press, because the hot press is almost too slick and it doesn't really take too much charcoal.
Right, yes, okay. But you do get a lot of texture from the cold press.
Yeah, yeah. It does give me a little bit of grain. This is something that I personally like. I know a lot of people don't really like that grain. If you're after absolutely seamless transition, absolutely soft, it's probably better if you use this kind of paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good.
I'm seeing one question here in the chat. Let me see. What did you say? What kind of charcoal you use? And they have coating on it. Okay, so to answer to that question, this is the kind of charcoal that I use. The brand is called Nitram. And the main difference about it is that between this kind of charcoal and this kind of charcoal, this is the one that I'm using, is that it keeps the shape better. I can sharpen it to a very fine tip, as you can see here. And that one, you can really sharpen it that well. The maximum sharpness that you can get out of it is something like this. And that one retains the shape a little bit longer. And what I like too is that it comes in different softness, the sharp, the soft, the medium, and the hard. There is other brands, I think, that they do that, but that's the one, for me, that's my favorite. All right. I don't know if anybody has any other question. I think that somebody's talking, but you guys have to remember to unmute yourselves, otherwise we cannot hear.
How's that? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So do you use a fixative?
Yeah, I would use fixative. I'm not going to do it right now because I'm in my apartment. And I would do that if I were to do it. I would go outside, and today, since it's raining, probably it's not the best day, but I would give it 5 coats of fixative at least So normally the way you do it is you spray it on from a certain distance so you don't get any drips. And you leave it to dry for a minute, you spray the second coat, you leave it to dry, and that I do that 5 times until when I touch the darker part, I don't get any charcoal on my finger.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Aina, I want to thank you so much for a wonderful demo. It is a very good likeness of your husband. You did a very nice job, and thank you so much for your demo today.
All right. Thank you too for hosting me. That was great. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.